DreAllDay.com.
Now tuned into the show where you learn the discipline to show up day after day to do the work, the confidence to put yourself out there boldly and authentically, and the mental toughness to continue showing up, doing the work, putting yourself out there, even when the success you expected to achieve is yet to be achieved. And on top of all this, you get a huge dose of personal initiative, which is go-getter energy that moves any one of us, including yourself, to go and make things happen instead of waiting for things to happen. And then we put all this together into a series of frameworks, approaches, insights, strategies, and techniques, all underneath the umbrella of one unifying philosophy that is called work on your game. My name is Dre Baldwin, also known as Dre All Day, and welcome to the show. And today's topic is how to solve problems. Maybe you think you already know how to solve problems, but we're going to get into this and give you a framework for the problems that maybe you haven't been able to solve up to this point. Before we get into that, I remind everybody or inform you that I send out a text message every morning that is guaranteed to have you focused, sharp, and on point to start your day. It is called the Daily Motivation. We also send out a Monday motivation every Monday. All you got to do to receive these messages is be in my text community. Once you join, we'll tell you all your options for how often you want to hear from me. Just text me at my number, which is 305-384-6894. And when those messages come out, depending on what you've opted into, you will be getting the messages that we send out. But whatever they are, whenever and however often you get them, they are guaranteed to do what I told you they're going to do, keep you focused, sharp, and on point. Secondly, Work on Your Game University. That is the place where I do all of my coaching. That's the only place I work with anyone directly. If you want to work with me and be coached by me, the only way to do so is to be a member of the university. You can do that by going to workonyourgameuniversity.com, workonyourgameuniversity.com. That link is down below in the description, as well as the number to get into my texting community. With all that out the way, let's get into the topic, which is how to solve problems. Now, remember that in order to elevate your position in life, anytime you want to move forward in life, you need to find bigger and higher quality problems to solve. Sometimes you will need to go looking for these problems. Oftentimes they will be presented to you in the form of, well, they'll be presented as problems, but what they actually represent are opportunities for you to move yourself forward. Also, conversely, whenever you are set to move up in life, you will be faced with bigger and more formidable problems than what you've had to face before. But that's basically the problem that you had to face in order to elevate in life is kind of like the bad guy you got to kill at the end of a level in a video game. If you don't kill the bad guy, you can't move on to the next level. And if you fail, then you got to go through the whole level again. You got to fight the bad guy again. Until you kill the bad guy at the end of the level, you can't move up to the next level. And the game is the same way that life works. You got to solve some big problem in order to elevate yourself to that next level. So knowing this, we should learn how to solve problems since we're all working on our games. And the people who listen to this show, you are all looking to ascend and move yourself forward in life. So let's talk about how to solve these problems that we need to solve to move ourselves up. Point number one. Topic, once again, is how to solve problems. Number one thing you need is accurate thinking. What is accurate thinking? First of all, let's be clear that a problem that is poorly or inaccurately defined can never be solved. If you poorly or inaccurately define what your problem is, you cannot solve it. For example, in my basketball days, I would often talk to players at the end of their seasons or who were in the off season of basketball, and they would tell me that they were looking to work on their games. I would ask them, what do you want to work on? And the common answer I would get from players was everything. That's the thing every player would say. I need to work on everything. That is a poorly defined problem. That is an inaccurately defined problem. It's not that the players were wrong in that they probably could stand to get better at every single aspect of the game. However, when you give yourself such a vague goal and such a vague problem defined, and your problem is so vaguely defined as I need to get better at everything, it's like you ask an entrepreneur what you need to get better at. The answer is they need to get better at everything. Well, how can you help them if they need to get better at everything? You can't really work on everything all at the same time, and everything does not have the same weight in terms of what problem needs to be addressed and what kind of return on investment will solving that problem actually produce for you. They are not all equal. So if you are inaccurately or poorly defining your problem, then you're probably never going to solve it. All right, so you don't want to need to work on everything, even though you may need everything. You don't want to focus on everything because that's kind of an oxymoron. You can't focus on everything at the same time. Humans' limitations, we can only focus on one thing at a time. So the first step to solving a problem, folks, is getting clear on what the problem actually is. First step to solving a problem is getting clear on what the problem actually is. If you solve for the wrong problem, or you don't even believe there is a problem, or you think the problem is everything, you may end up fixing some things that are not broken while leaving things that are broken still unfixed and not addressing the things that will produce the biggest change if addressed. So even though a basketball player or an entrepreneur, maybe you do need to work on everything because you're not good at anything in your particular space. This can 100% be true. Understand that there are probably a handful of things that if you just focused on them, they would produce they would make a bigger impact on your overall situation than a bunch of other stuff. So we still need to narrow down what are the most important things that you need to focus on. For example, in Work on Your Game University, we focus on 4 specific areas: mindset, strategy, systems, and accountability. So even though you as an entrepreneur may be terrible at every aspect of entrepreneurship, when you focus on these 4 areas, I guarantee you will produce a higher return on investment than if you try to focus on quote unquote everything that you could possibly do in business. Right? It's the first step in solving a problem, getting clear on what it is. So you don't want to solve for the wrong problem and fix something that's not broken while leaving the broken stuff still unfixed, the most important broken stuff. So accurate thinking, by the way, is one of the 17 principles of success that Napoleon Hill outlined in his book called Think and Grow Rich. If you have a copy of that book, I would suggest you go read the chapter on accurate thinking. And in my reading of Dan Kennedy, he consistently points out, and Dan Kennedy is a marketing guy, he consistently points out that accurate thinking is the one of those 17 principles of Mr. Hill's that is most often ignored, but Dan Kennedy asserts it is the most important of the 17 principles. And the reason why Dan Kennedy talks about accurate thinking being so important is because we need to know exactly what we're talking about when we are addressing problems, fixing issues, and crafting solutions. And I 100% agree with what Dan Kennedy is saying. I agree with the reasoning behind what he is saying. Now, I don't know if I would consider accurate thinking the most important of the 17 principles, but I get why he believes it is, because his reasoning is sound. That we need to be clear in identifying what a problem is. Dan Kennedy's his expertise was in marketing strategy. That was his thing, marketing strategy when he was doing his thing. So it makes perfect sense that he would say, we got to accurately address the problem, because if he's helping some person in their business with their marketing and they think the problem is, well, my ad campaigns aren't good, Dan Kennedy might say, well, that's not actually the problem. The problem is you don't do a good job of nurturing the leads that you do have. So it doesn't matter how many ads we run, because you're fumbling the ball once you get people to come into your world. So we got to get accurate on what the problem is. So everybody understands this. We got to make sure we're addressing the right things. And I've talked about this many times here on the show, that we got to answer the right question, right? You answer the wrong question, you may get the right answer, but you're answering the wrong question. So you still are in the same spot. So this is what accurate thinking is about. And again, read that chapter in Napoleon Hill's book where he addresses this more deeply. So if we are inaccurate in figuring out what the root is of what we are doing, or the root of why we're doing it, then nothing we produce will be accurate either. So if you're a basketball player and the reason you're not getting in the game, the coach is not putting you in the game, is because you're bad on defense and you can't make a layup, but you think you need to spend the offseason working on your jump shot. Hey, maybe you do need to work on your jump shot. Maybe your jump shot is not that good, but fixing your jump shot is not going to change the problem that you have when it comes to playing time, because the coach isn't putting you in the game, not because of your bad jump shot, but because of your bad defense and your inability to make a layup. So if you inaccurately define the problem, you can solve a different problem. Okay, now you're a great jump shooter. You can shoot as well as Steph Curry, but that ain't the reason why you were on the bench in the first place. So now you're shooting as well as Steph Curry, but you're still sitting on the bench because you didn't fix the right problem. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? So the actual problem for, let's back up. If you're running a business, for example, let's use a business example. You think your biggest problem is you don't have good ads. I already told you this. But the actual problem is that you have a poorly constructed sales process, meaning you're fumbling the ball. Somebody comes into your world, you're not nurturing the leads the right way, you're not setting them up the right way, you're not preparing them for the sale, and then your sales process sucks, meaning you don't know how to present your product or your offer. You're not doing a good job of closing the sale. You're just messing the whole process up. You're not following up the right way. So it doesn't matter how many ads you create, because all an ad does is bring more people into your world. But if you're fumbling every person who comes into your world, then bringing more people into the world only exacerbates the issue. It makes your problem even worse. So you're going to keep having the same problem because you have inaccurately defined the issue at hand. It's kind of like you're in a swimming pool, you don't know how to swim. That's your problem. So if you're in 3 feet of water, going into 5 feet of water is not going to make the problem better. It's going to make it worse. You go into 8 feet of water is going to make it worse. Nobody's that tall. So at some point you might end up drowning because you can't swim. So the deeper the water you go into, the worse the problem becomes. So we got to make sure we accurately define our problems. Point number 2. Today's topic, once again, is how to solve problems. Number 2 is massive action. Multiple ideas deployed simultaneously to see which ones are the winners. That's what massive action means. Multiple ideas deployed simultaneously to see which ones are the winners. In other words, if you have a problem and you're not quite sure how to solve it, usually that's one of the things that happens when we have problems. If we knew how to solve it, then it wouldn't really be a problem. And then we come up with a few ideas for how it could possibly be solved. Maybe we come up with one or two. The issue is we're too slow in incorporating our possible fixes to the problem, and therefore it takes us too long to get the problem solved if we ever get it solved. So if you got 8 ideas for how to solve a problem, deploy all 8 ideas at the same time and just see which one is working, which one is producing a result. Don't do one and then say, okay, yes or no. Then number 2, yes or no. Number 3, yes or no. See, that takes too long. You need to do all 8 at the same time. This is what massive action means. And some of you may be thinking right now, well, how would I possibly do that? Well, that's a good question. Questions like that are where insights come from. Questions that you can't quite answer are where insights come from. And these are the kind of questions you should be asking. Don't stonewall yourself, well, I can't do it that way, and then just say, well, I can't, and then since I can't, let me just stick to my normal way of doing things. You don't want to do that. That's suicide. Why? Because your normal way of doing things is how you got to the problem in the first place. Your normal way of doing things needs to be retired if you plan on elevating yourself to a higher level. Everyone understand me? Tony Robbins talks a lot about massive action plans. It's when once you find a problem, you're clear that it needs to be addressed, and you know that you need to address it. Massive action is finding out or doing a bunch of things at once to figure out the solution to the problem. The challenge that many people have is that they move too slowly in their action plans. And many people only have action plans, but even when they do, they move too damn slow. Your actions are too small, too incremental rather than massive. Incremental is one step at a time. Massive is incremental is like taking the steps, or massive action is like taking the elevator. Many people whom I have read on the subject of personal development push this idea of deploying many ideas at once to see which ones actually end up working. There's so many different authors I've heard say some form of this that I can't even give credit to any one person for it. And I agree with this idea. This is the best way to find a solution to any problem once the problem is clearly defined. As you have heard me say here, many people do things too slow and they do things later. You heard me talk about that in the episode on how to get more life out of your life, is to do things fast and to do things now. So I talked about that in episode number 2648, how to get more life out of your life. I also talked about fast implementation in episode 1392. So these ideas are all interlinked. Everything we talked about here so far, you notice how they all connect to each other. Clearly defining a problem, then being fast to implement some solutions, doing it right now so we can solve the problem as quickly as possible. The sooner you can solve problems, the sooner you can get to the success that you want to get to. And the sooner you can get to the next level that you want to get to. Keeping in mind, folks, that every one of us is on the clock. So the longer it takes you to achieve a goal, the less time you will have left to bask in the sunlight of the goal achieved. And if it takes you a long time to achieve the goal, well, you might run out of time before you get there. And you don't want that tragedy to be you adding more value to the most valuable real estate on earth, which is the cemetery. All that talent and potential within you going to the grave with you. Point number 3. Today's topic, once again, is how to solve problems. Number 3, immediate and decisive behavior. One observation or conversation is enough to lead someone to action. One observation or conversation is enough to lead a person to action. What does this mean? Remember the 10% rule of information and action. You only need 10% of the information to get started taking action. Any of you hasn't heard that rule before, you can find out more about that in episode 1429. One observation or conversation. When you have 10% of the information, that's enough for you to get started. You only need 10% to get started. Okay? You do not need to know everything. It's impossible for you to know everything. You do not need to have a clear solution to get started. You just need to have enough to move. Can you take one step? Once you have decided that action must be taken, you need to quickly move yourself into an active state. Turn that potential energy kinetic. Again, many people do things slow and later rather than fast and now. And this is another place this gets implemented. Keep in mind that every time you move fast and you do things now, you are buying yourself time relative to the old version of you, yesterday's version, that was doing things slow and later. Therefore, you are winning. Excuse me. Because your new business practices, your new operating system is a better way of saying it. It's not a business practice. Operating system, which applies to your business, has bought you time. Therefore, you will have more life to live, keeping in mind that your life ain't unlimited. You have a limited amount of life. So the more of it you can buy for yourself, the better. So the faster and the sooner you can move yourself to action, the more life you are affording yourself. And this is something that I talked about in that episode on how to get more life out of your life, which was, again, episode 2648. It's one that you're going to hear me referencing over and over again over the years, is that many people are simply too slow to take action. Many people move way, way, way too slowly. When you get an idea, when you get a thought, when you have something that you know you want to do or something that you know you need to do, many people just drag their feet and they move way too slowly. If you can just start moving more fast with more speed and urgency in your activities in life, and at the same time, you get smarter about which activities you need to actually do. This is where the accurate thinking part comes in. Then this is where the 10x results start coming from. This is where you start to multiply your results rather than simply add or stay neutral, which is what happens with a lot of people because they are not accurate in their thinking and they're too slow to actually do anything when they do think, including thinking itself. Many people are too slow of thought, all of these things. So you see how all of these pieces go together. And if you stay connected to what we're doing over here at Work on Your Game, with this show and Work on Your Game University and all the other things that we have going on, we will cure you of all these infectious diseases, but you got to stay plugged in. All right, not just picking and choosing when you feel comfortable, but you got to stay plugged in. All right, that's where the change happens. Let's recap today's class, which is how to solve problems. In order to elevate yourself in life, you must solve problems. Problems will be presented to you when you're about to elevate, and until you solve them, you stay in the same spot. Number one, accurate thinking. You got to get clear on what the actual problem is. If you don't know what the problem is and you solve for the wrong thing, then you will either go backwards or stay in the same spot. If you stay in the same spot where the world is moving forward, you're going backwards by definition, so you still lose it. Point number two, massive action. Once you get clear that what the problem is, you need to deploy multiple different options for solving the problem and identify which one is actually working to solve the problem. It may not be number 1, 2, or 3, but number 4 actually works. But if you take too long to get to number 4, then it'll take you too long to solve the problem, and therefore you're losing as time goes by. Number 3, immediate and decisive behavior. Once you decide that something needs to be done, do it now and do it fast. Do it with a sense of urgency. You need to think and act with a sense of urgency as consistently as you possibly can. Remind yourself consciously to do this, and it will become a normal habit, a normal way of operating for you. And I guarantee you, you will live more life simply because you are getting more things done in a shorter period of time. And again, this just becomes your normal way of operating. I'm not saying that doing this alone is just going to make all the difference in your life. It will make a huge difference for many of you who operate so slowly as to, it would be laughable if it wasn't such a tragedy, because your time is not unlimited. So when you're moving slowly, you're basically telling the world and you're telling yourself that it's okay if you end up going to the graveyard with all your potential and talent and juice still in you. All right, that shouldn't happen, especially if you're plugged in over here on a consistent basis. All that said, make sure you text me so you're getting my daily motivation text and Monday motivation text when they go out. My number is 305-384-6894 and workonyourgameuniversity.com. That's the only place you can work with me directly. That is linked down below in the description. And work on your game. Dre, all